Okay, cool. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 33 of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. I'm your co-host, Mashal St. Patrick Hewitt, and with me as ever is my partner in crime, Santoki.
Yes, Mashal. Good to see you, Mashal. We've made it into 2021 and West Indies are straight into it on their tours. We're kicking it off with a January tour to Bangladesh. And with this podcast, we're taking a new route. Usually when we preview series, it's between myself, Nikhil, Caribbean experts. But this time we thought, why not get an expert from the opposition? So we're joined by a Bangladeshi cricket expert today, Mash. Do you want to introduce him to the people?
Yes, indeed. Today we are joined by Tawhid Qureshi. And you know what? The way this worked out, so before this episode was when it was in the melting pot and we were thinking about what to do, Santoki and I said to ourselves, surely there's someone in the Bangladesh cricket community who we can reach out to, who wants to jump on the pod and tell us all about Bangladesh cricket. And we're so grateful that Tawhid reached out to us, and he didn't even realize that we probably would have tried to reach out to him if he hadn't come to us anyways. So let me not waffle on too long, which I'm prone to do sometimes. Let me go straight to our guest. Tawhid, introduce yourself. Tell us your story.
Sure. Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me on. It's really great to be on. In terms of my story, well, I've I guess a lifelong cricket lover and a lifelong cricket follower. And basically over the last sort of 20 odd years been following Bangladesh cricket in all its glory and in all its inglory as well, I suppose. But yeah, been following the team both home and away, basically, yeah, ever since the 1999 World Cup that took place over here, that took place in the UK. Ever since then, kind of been hooked on kind of following the progress of the team, really.
Indeed. And we're gonna try and get into everything, the nuts and bolts of the Bangladesh cricket team and how that pertains to the upcoming tour. Obviously, this podcast is just over a year old, and every single series that Santoki and I have previewed prior to a podcast, we've predicted a defeat. and to be honest, Santoki, I don't think I'm changing my mind even I'm not changing my mind. I'm predicting straight defeat again. But we'll get into it and we'll chew the fat because as ever, the last time we were with you, those who are listening to this podcast, the last time we were with you, we had Nikita Miller on and former West Indian domestic, I would say, but international as well. Star of the West Indies and particularly the Jamaica Scorpions at the regional level. And we're speaking to him about West Indies in the New Zealand tour and kind of dissecting what went on there. At the time, Santoki, we had no idea what was set to unfold ahead of the Bangladesh tour, because we had, in discussing with Nikita, we were basically saying who should be dropped, should we bring anyone in? And Nikita, and in fairness, ourselves as well, were like, well, it's going to be hard to drop anyone because there's no domestic cricket going on. So how can we drop anyone? Little did we know that 12 players would then go on to drop themselves.
Yeah, I think Mash, we had talked about it. We expected a few players to pull out, maybe because of bubble fatigue. And obviously we'd seen the likes of Bravo, Hetmeyer, Kemo pull out of the England tour. So we expected 2 or 3. But when the news came out, Jason Holder was potentially pulling out, Roston Chase potentially pulling out, the test captain and the vice captain, we realized something big was happening, and then it was confirmed, as you said, 10 players pulled out for health reasons, and then obviously Fabian Allen and Shane Dowich for their own personal reasons. So 12 in total. Massive changes to the squad. Kyron Pollard, ODI captain out. Jason Holder, as I said, test captain out. And particularly, I mean, the test squad, it's slightly like a makeshift squad, but generally there's still a core there. The ODI squad has been completely decimated. Only 3 players from the last ODI we played in Sri Lanka in March last year have retained a place in this squad. So it's a makeshift squad full of players from the regional level. And Mash, I guess you were kind of hinting at it. In some ways, it's kind of exciting seeing these new players step up to an international level.
Most definitely, and I think sorry, that's my fault, but most definitely, I think first and foremost we should just say, I mean, you've hinted at some of the names, Santoki, but obviously the Test captains pulled out. Jason Holder, the ODI captain Kyron Pollard's pulled out. Darren Bravo, Roston Chase, Shimron Hetmeyer, Nicholas Puran. I think those are the big names we can talk about. Fabian Allen, Shane Dowrich have pulled out for personal reasons. Now, yeah, as you say, Santoki, and Tawhid, we're going to come straight to you after I kind of give this opinion here. I am. This is I'm not pausing because I don't know what to say. I'm pausing because I'm trying to think of how to say this correctly. First things first. If a player cites that they have pulled out of a tour because they have concerns about COVID and personal fears and safety concerns re-COVID, I think first we have to set the disclaimer of we cannot hold that against any player. I think we have to set that disclaimer. If that is your genuine reasoning, I can't hold that against you. And I think you have every right to turn around and say, I don't want to go. And as you said, Santoki, Bravo didn't go to England for that reason. Shimron didn't go to England, and Kimo Paul didn't go to England for that reason. So initially, that's my point. However, and I sent you a message in the WhatsApp, Santoki, when they pulled out, if you remember, and I said to you, are you sure they're not pulling out just because it's Bangladesh? Do you remember I sent you that WhatsApp message? And you and I had a big conversation about whether they're doing that or not. And I think I said they wouldn't have done this to another team. Are you sure this isn't a Bangladesh thing? Now if any player listens to this, I'm not saying that's what you've done. I'm just saying it looks a bit odd because when the England tour went ahead, people were dying in thousands when the England tour went ahead. And I would just love to know what was so secure about going to England at the time in June. New Zealand makes sense because there wasn't COVID, so I can't use New Zealand as an example. But what was so certain about going to England that is uncertain about going to Bangladesh? And I think you were shocked, Santoki, when I said, but look at how many have died in Bangladesh. I'm not saying that means there isn't a problem, but it's less than 10, still a lot, but it's less than 10K. England in June, it was at 40K. So I don't know. This just looks. I got some concerns here. Is all I'm going to say. Who wants to go next?
Go ahead, Tawhid. I think you should come in with your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I kind of echo a lot of what you just said there. I think from my point of view, or from a Bangladesh point of view, there's a few things to disentangle. I guess if you're looking at things a little bit dispassionately, you could sort of say that there's a bit of a perfect storm that's kind of brewed, that's kind of resulted in all these people dropping out. I guess, yeah, the timings wise, I mean, you guys will know this better than anyone. In terms of the West Indies taking part already in sort of 2 tours, and therefore, being in almost continuous bubbles for what, going sort of 6 months plus, sort of 6 to 9 months now. Obviously, that's not ideal to then sort of go straight into another tour. So that, I think that's one sort of factor, one thing to look at. But I think you're right in terms of when I sort of heard about all these dropouts, there was that sort of nagging sense at the back of my mind about the thing of, well, maybe because it's Bangladesh, it's only Bangladesh, that sort of attitude that unfortunately I think does still prevail amongst kind of the top international teams at the moment. So that was part, that I think inevitably probably does play a part in the decisions. But what kind of interests me or confuses me slightly is that actually, if you look back to the last time they toured back in 2018, towards the end of 2018, pretty much all of those players that you just mentioned there, the list of omissions, pretty much all of them that were on that tour. Okay, it was obviously totally different time. There was no pandemic, there was no COVID there. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that a lot of those players, they know about Bangladesh, they know what it's like to tour Bangladesh. And actually, even pre-COVID, touring Bangladesh, okay, you're not in a bubble as such, but you're not really going to have this, or you wouldn't have had the same sort of freedoms that you would have if you were touring the UK or, South Africa or Australia, wherever else, sort of 2 years ago. So to my mind, a lot of those players should be kind of used to that kind of way of touring within Bangladesh. And indeed, a lot of them have done in the past. And also, tournaments like the BPL, a lot of those players that you mentioned, like people like Hetmyer, people like Puran, have featured fairly regularly in the BPL over the past sort of few years. So they're not, for me, I don't think they're against touring Bangladesh per se, because they have done previously and they have done before. So yeah, there must be, I don't know, something else to it. And I think, the mixed messages that have kind of emanated from the West Indies camp, just for me anyway, lends itself to more confusion rather than to really sort of clarify why people have pulled out.
I think as Mash said earlier, obviously it's to do with health and players have to look after their own health, so we can't begrudge them for that. Initially, when I did see the players pull out, I thought, okay, this must be mainly down to bubble fatigue. If you look at Jason Holder, he's played in the England Series, CPL, IPL, the New Zealand Tour, then the Big Bash, so maybe he won a break. But then when you hear players like Shai Hope refuse to go, who hasn't played cricket since September, Roston Chase, Shamar Brooks, guys who only play Test cricket and haven't been in continuous bubbles. And then Nicholas Pooran in an interview to ESPN saying once he heard players pull out for health reasons or health scares, he joined them and pulled out as well, which suggests that it wasn't bubble fatigue at all. Its players had concerns, which again kind of contradicts itself because West Indies did send out a health and safety team to Bangladesh and they okayed it. So what evidence if it is down to purely health reasons why players aren't going and their concerns, what evidence are they basing it on? Because surely all the logistical and medical evidence they've received from the West Indies health and safety managers have suggested it is safe to go.
Yeah, 100%. I think perfectly put, Santokin. I think WEPA, the Players Association, also said that having viewed and seen what the Cricket West Indies medical team had done with their counterparts in Bangladesh, they were like, yeah, we're fine with this. We're good for it to go. Again, disclaimer. If the players are genuine, if COVID is their genuine reason, and I mean it's a worldwide pandemic, that's a good enough reason, then I'm not going to say that they shouldn't have done it, but there's just a few too many question marks about it. And I think Tawhid, you put in your article, and for those who are going to end up watching this on YouTube, I'm now going to attempt to scroll it. Yeah, there you go. So if you are watching this on YouTube, I've put the link on the bottom. If you're listening on audio, you're probably wondering what I'm talking about. But basically, for the visual viewers, I put a link to Tawhid's article, and I'll say go and have a read of it, because in there, Tawhid, you put something about what you said you were worried about is this precedent which is set. What knock-on effect does it have for anybody else now to tour Bangladesh? Whether the players meant, of course, they didn't mean it like that, but teams haven't needed much of an excuse in the past to not tour Bangladesh. And if West Indies are now saying, well, we've got West Indies, not a major team, but if West Indies are saying we have concerns, I don't see Australia or England or anyone like that touring Bangladesh anytime soon. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the key concerns, isn't it? And like you say, I think Australia have postponed. Australia was supposed to tour, or have continually supposed to have toured over about the last sort of 3 years. I think a tour seems to be postponed almost as regularly as anything. So. You're right. It doesn't take much for teams, or for the big three, if you like, to not tour Bangladesh. And my concern is that players choosing not to tour for let's face it, reasons that aren't 100% transparent. And I think that's the main issue here, is around transparency. If there was more transparency in the decision making in the process that the players have come to that decision, then I don't think anyone can begrudge them the reasons for those decisions. But yeah, I think when there is this sort of opaque decision making around it, and it seems to kind of more be motivated, or not motivated, but more the decisions have been reached more through reasons of emotion rather than actual kind of evidence, sort of an evidence-based approach, then yeah, that certainly does kind of throw up some real concerns, like you say, for other teams to sort of follow suit and potentially send sort of second string or vastly weakened teams to Bangladesh.
I think it also hints at kind of the monopoly of cricket, because if you think, as Tawhid said, you've had Australia in the past pull out, whereas obviously when England were touring India and they had the Mumbai terror attacks, England returned a month later to play, despite the safety concerns. Whereas obviously when England went to tour Bangladesh a few years ago, I remember Owen Morgan pulled out, Alex Hales pulled out. So there is the sense of, if West Indies were playing India in January, and there were the same safety concerns, do you think that amount of players would have pulled out?
Well, I'm saying no, absolutely. I'm saying at best one player is pulling out. Yeah. Again, Santoki, I can't disagree with anything you're saying there. I can't. But again, I don't want this to come across that I don't think it is, but I don't want this to come across like we're saying, these players are lying and they should have gone. I'm not saying they should have toured. I'm not saying they must all tour and they must do their international duty for the West Indies. No, if you don't want to go, you don't want to go. But the key word is the word that Tawhid used there, transparency. I think there could have been a bit more transparency over this, and that's why people are gonna, not just on this podcast but anywhere in the Caribbean, there will be questions raised. Now, if I fast forward from that ever so slightly, Santoki, so the squad that has been named, the ODI squad, this is the official ODI squad that is touring to Bangladesh. Jason Mohammed, captain, out of nowhere, not even someone who was in the team and has been in the team previously, just straight out of nowhere to captain the side. Sunil Ambris, vice captain, Nkrumah Bonner, Josh De Silva, Jamar Hamilton, Keon Harding, who has just come in to replace Romario Shepherd, who has COVID, Chamar Holder, Akil Hussain, Alzari Joseph, Kyle Mayers, Andre McCarthy, Kieran Otley, Rovman Powell, Ramon Reefer, and Hayden Walsh. Is it harsh, Santoki, to say that is a very, very weak side?
Yeah, I think that would be accurate to say it's I mean, I don't even know if you'd class it as a second string side, because there are some guys who have come in out of nowhere to sort of cement. I mean, if you look at the likes of Otley, McCarthy, they've just sort of come out of nowhere. They've been picked based on regional performances. Don't forget, most of these guys haven't played cricket at a professional level in 2020. They would have last played cricket 2019 List A competition. So it's a very left field choice. I mean, West Indies have been forced to pick this squad, and as you said, Jason Mohammed hasn't played, I think, since 2018 for West Indies in ODIs. Ironically, that was against Bangladesh in Guyana. But he's sort of come out of nowhere to captain the side, and I guess, Michelle, it's sort of damage limitation. I'm not expecting anything more than a series defeat, but you're sort of hoping some players can kind of stand up and put in individual performances. I mean, on the bright side, Sunil Ambris did open in our last ODI against Sri Lanka. He scored 60 off 60 balls in subcontinent conditions. Hayden Walsh Jr. as well. He's someone who's been in the ODI side and he's featuring as well. And Alzari Joseph. So we've got 3 players who would have made it anyway. But the other 8 players, I don't know where even to start, Michelle.
Well, I think before we hand over to Tawhid to look at it in the context of the Bangladesh squad that has just been announced earlier this week in the last few days, The worry for obviously we'll be rallying and we'll want them to do well. The worry for me is when I look at that side, I don't see a very strong batting lineup.
No.
That I think the bowling will actually compete. I'm not actually too concerned. As you correctly pointed out, Hayden Walsh, Alzari Joseph. I'm not concerned there. These are seasoned players. It'll be exciting to see players like Chamar Holder, Akil Hussain. So the bowling, I think there's actually elements there that we can look forward to. Even Ramon Rifa as an all-rounder. But the batting on paper looks weak. You can't really identify, other than Ambrish, you can't even identify another opener of Otley, but you can't identify proven players in the batting lineup. Now, the reason why this is a concern to me, I mean, when I went to the press conference, the Cricket West Indies press conference after the squad was announced, Roger Harper and Jimmy Adams were at pains to say this represents an exciting opportunity for players who probably wouldn't have got a look in. The younger players wouldn't have got a look in for a while, and the ones who are out in the wilderness or on the fringes probably wouldn't have got a look in without like a key set of injuries. So Jimmy's point very much was like, take this opportunity, do well, and put pressure on the incumbents who have opted out of the tour. That's all he can choose to do, and he's right. So in that context, they should be wanting to seize this opportunity with every single hand, bat, pad, everything they can do to try and force their way into the reckoning. The only thing that makes me think we won't lose 3-0, and we're odds on to lose 3-0. The only thing that makes me think they won, and I'm coming to you now, Tawhid, to give me a bit more. I want you to give me some hope on this, Tawhid. The only reason I think we won't lose 3-0 and maybe 2-1 is it's not like Bangladesh have played any cricket. Now, don't get me wrong, Santoki, you're saying, well, our players haven't played any cricket. But some of those players have gone to England, have gone to New Zealand, have been in permanent camps, played some CPL. Whereas, yes, and I know in Bangladesh they played like, was it like the equivalent of a T20 tournament and like a domestic T21? So they have done something. But I don't know. I think even though we're understaffed, Riyadh first choice players, Bangladesh are undercooked. What do you think about that, Tawhid?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think the biggest sort of factor going into the series for Bangladesh is this huge gap certainly in terms of playing international sort of competitive cricket. There's been this gap or this ongoing gap of over 300 days. The last time they played was sort of back in March of last year, and that was a home series against Zimbabwe, which they won quite convincingly across all the three formats, in fact. So, I would say the one kind of straw for the West Indies to clutch to in terms of doing well in the series is potentially, like you say, Bangladesh being kind of unprepared or underprepared. I mean, to qualify that, however, I would say that the squad that they've selected is kind of vastly experienced in terms of the core of that squad. So, the likes of Tamim, Mushraf Fikur, Mahmudullah and Shakib, those four alone have played together, I think, well over 100 times just among themselves. So they really form the core of that side. And then, you throw in some really good kind of rising stars. A couple to look out for, I guess, would be Liton Das, the opening partner of Tamim. He had a really good series against Zimbabwe just before that long break, and just generally over the last sort of couple of years, he's one that's really impressed in terms of sort of kicking his game on to that next level. And then in terms of the bowling, again, you've got some good kind of all-round bowling options. So you've got Mustafiz, who seems to be rejuvenated. So he's had a couple of good domestic tournaments. Like you say, there was this domestic T20 tournament. It wasn't a franchise tournament. It was just something that the BCB, the cricket board, kind of hastily arranged just to give the players a bit of middle practice, I guess. So yeah, he did well in that. And then you've got other sort of good bowling options in terms of the spinners as well. People like Mehdi Hassan Miraz, who again sort of coming back into form. I think you might remember him kind of exploding onto the scene in 2016 with that amazing series against England. So yeah, they've got some good experience as well as kind of good balance as well in terms of sort of their bowling options. So yeah, to kind of qualify the undercookedness of them, I would say is the fact that that they look very strong on paper.
I think what's remarkable about the Bangladesh squad is, as you said, just the sheer amount of experience. Like Tamim Iqbal, Shakib, they're all in their early 30s, but they've been playing international cricket for a long time. They were blooded into the Bangladesh side as teenagers, and they've sort of got vast experience. Rahim as well. Like you said, and there's players coming through like Lytton Das. I did actually remember I watched Bangladesh South Africa in the Cricket World Cup at the Oval 2019, and just Shakib at 4 and Rahim at 5, they're just confident. They know their game inside out. And so I think whilst they haven't played cricket for a year, their experience of playing all situations and just having played international cricket for so long means that they will still be able to put up the performances, I think, in this series, which is a worry for West Indies, who contrastingly will have numerous players making their ODI debut.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that the last time West Indies were in Bangladesh, we lost both test matches inside 3 days. I remember it because that was yet another moment in my West Indies supporting life where I entered the meltdown stage. It was another time, Santoki, where I fired off a letter to Cricket West Indies saying enough was enough.
Should we go ahead? I was going to say, should we go ahead and try and predict the 11 for the ODI squad then? Who do we think out of this squad of players is going to make the 11, and kind of what Bangladesh can expect from them?
Yeah, so I wrote this down the other day. So I think Sunil Ambrish will open. I think that's a certainty. He opened in our last ODI tour. I think that his position is set for now. He'll open with Kieran Otley. Because Otley should or shouldn't, but he's the only other opener there. Unless you put Josh De Silva there. Then, to be honest, Santoki, it's much of a muchness from there. I can't. I mean,
I had at 3. I was going to go either Andre McCarthy or Carl Mayers at 3. Would be the only.
See, I was going to go Bonner. Only because I think both openers are going to. Well, at least one of those openers is going to go cheaply. So you assume you have to put someone in then who can rebuild the innings. And Mayers to me is the only power hitter. Oh, well, Rovman Powell as well, but Mayers is the only power hitter really that in the squad. You'd want him to come in a bit later. So I maybe go on.
I was going to say, yeah, I guess Bonner at 3, but definitely I would have De Silva at 4 because he batted there for the emerging team.
Okay.
So I think that's where they'll go with De Silva at 4. I wouldn't want him to open anyway. I think, as you said, he's similar to Bonner in that he can kind of build a platform for the innings.
Yeah, actually, very good point. So it could even be De Silva at 3. Mayers will then come in for me at 4. Mohammed is coming 5. Mohammed is definitely 5 because he's captain. Then you're looking at the all-rounders. I don't think Rovman Powell deserves to play because his form for the whole of 2020 has been atrocious, whether in EPL or whether the T20s, etc. So I don't think he deserves to play, but I think he will play. So Ramon Reefer gets in my side. Powell is probably getting shoehorned in there as well. Because Romario Shepherd now has COVID, that probably opens up a position for Powell. So you go Ramon Reefer, Rovman Powell, and then you're effectively into the bowlers.
Yeah, the bowlers, I was going to say, you'd have the 2 quicks, Shamar and Joseph, and then Hayden Walsh and Akil Hussain. Yeah,
basically.
I think actually a big blow is Romario Shepherd. New Zealand, he scored a brilliant counter attack in '93 for the A side, and he took wickets as well. So I think he'll be missed in Bangladesh as well. So that's a big blow for the side. But as you said, Mash, I think the bowling, Shamar Holder, Alzari Joseph, and then Walsh Jr. and Hussain as the bowling options. I'm quite confident in that bowling attack. I don't think they'll struggle too badly. It's just the batting, as you said, the batting so hit and miss. What it is with this side is it's not even as if they've put in young players and said, all right, these guys can learn from this experience. Most of the guys coming in, Andre McCarthy's 33, Carl Mayer's 28, Keon Otley 31, Bonner 31. They're like regional veterans. So you don't see them having a long-term career in the West Indies ODI side. They're sort of just a stopgap to try and get through this tour in a sense. And ironically, the last time we saw this kind of squad composition was 2009 when the players had a strike in the test format.
Yeah.
And Bangladesh got their first series win against us in the West Indies. So things have come full circle, I would say.
Yeah, yet another meltdown point in my life as well. But do you know what? That strike series when Bangladesh won in the Caribbean, which I had a meltdown over, and then the humiliation in Bangladesh in 2018, actually links nicely into something I wanted to raise with Tawhid here. In that, and you as well, Santoki, actually, because the view that I'm about to present here is possibly the naive one that maybe a lot of people in cricket have. First things first, Bangladesh are West Indies equals or better. At this point in time in cricket, I never see us play Bangladesh and think, here's an easy win. Now, disclaimer, obviously when Bangladesh came to the Caribbean, we blew them away. When Holder, Roach and Gabriel just blew them away, blasting out the wickets. They couldn't cope with the short ball, this, that, and the other. So, yes, I hear that before people say, no, you're wrong, because it was 2-0 in the Caribbean. Okay, yeah, I hear that. But I consider Bangladesh on a par with the West Indies, if not better. But here's my critique. Shouldn't Bangladesh be better by now? Now, I go back to the fact that, and Tawhid, you mentioned those four batsmen, for example, Iqbal, Shakib, Mushfiqur, who have I missed out? Linton, that's someone, I just missed out someone. Yes, yeah. Though they've been around for a while. And they're not bad batsmen. I'm not trying to say, I'm not saying they've underachieved. That's not my point. What I am saying is they have a core of players where surely at this point in their journey, they should be beating more than just beating teams like West Indies. Or am I being harsh?
I think there's an element of truth in what you say. I guess the question is, are they perpetually underachieving rather than anything else? I guess there's a few ways of looking at it. I think Bangladesh at home now are a very difficult proposition for any team, who comes and visits, who comes and tours, be it one of the top three, even if it's Australia or England or India. So they have beaten both England and Australia in tests in red ball cricket over the last few years. They've drawn series against both those teams. They drew against England in that 2016 series. Arguably should have won that series 2-0. They won that first test in Chittagong by a margin of something like 20 odd runs. So it's a very close series. So in terms of being difficult to beat at home, in red ball and white ball cricket as well, I'd say. I would say that, they've kind of ticked that box. I think that the improvement that needs to be made, and it's something that the current coach, Russell Domingo, has kind of alluded to, and that is to make Bangladesh much more competitive on foreign wickets. So principally that means that, to develop their bowling attack in terms of develop its variety. So interestingly, again, what Russell Domingo has done, and actually this kind of change in mindset happened maybe a year or two ago when Courtney Walsh actually joined the coaching staff there as fast bowling coach leading into the World Cup. and that was specifically to try to develop Bangladesh's fast bowling stocks, or quick bowling stocks, to make them more competitive overseas and on English wickets, on wickets in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. So there is this gradual change in mindset, and actually, if you look at the red ball grouping in particular now, there is an emphasis on developing fast bowlers and giving them as much of a chance as possible. But as we know, that sort of change doesn't happen overnight, and to facilitate that change, you need different wickets at home as well. You need wickets that are going to be slow and low and spin friendly. So yeah, there is this dichotomy at the moment between, okay, if we prepare a traditional slow low turner, chances are we are going to beat whoever we play against. However, if we want to give our team or our players the best chance going forward and looking ahead, we're going to have to produce wickets that are a bit more sporting, that have a bit more in it for the bowlers. So yeah, there is that slight kind of dichotomy that I guess the team management are going through at the moment. So yeah, in terms of answering your question, should they be better than what they are at the moment? Well, yes and no. I guess, just generally, forget about the last sort of 300 days plus. They just, unfortunately, for various reasons, they do not play enough cricket full stop. So actually, even going back sort of, beyond the last 12 months, you look at their international calendar compared to most other teams, there is a real dearth of cricket, certainly cricket against those sort of teams that are ranked higher or ranked above them. So, as we know, you're only going to improve if you play against those better teams. And then the final point I would make is, we've talked a lot about those. Well, they used to be known as the famous five, where you had Mashrafi, who's interestingly who has been dropped now from the ODI squad. But you had this famous five who were kind of like the golden generation of Bangladesh cricket. So you had Mashrafi, you've still got Shakib, you've still got Tamim, you've got Mahmudullah, and you've got Mushafiq. So really, those five over the last, like you say, 10 to 15 years have been the real focus, the real core of the team. But I think what's happened is that there hasn't been an immediate generation sort of kicking on their heels to try to displace them. As you were saying, Santoki, it's quite amazing just how many games they have played together over such a long period of time. And I think part of that is maybe within Bangladesh cricket, there's been a bit of a complacency around, well, we've got this amazing side. We don't, let's just see how good they can, see how well they can do, how well they can perform. And I think it would be a fair comment to say that the generation that's immediately behind them has either been neglected or just hasn't been harnessed to the same degree. So yeah, I would say from that point of view, there has been this slight sort of gap in terms of talent management. However, the thing that really excites me, and this may or may not be on your radar, but the Bangladesh under-19 team did win the World Cup in South Africa. That was last March, February actually, over in South Africa. So they beat India in the final, they beat New Zealand in the semis. So they had a fantastic run in the tournament, and also fantastic series wins against England sort of going into the tournament itself. So that under-19 team, I think the hope is that a lot of those players are on this pathway now to hopefully to represent the full national team. So there is cause for optimism, I'd say, but yeah, still lots of things that can be put right and should be put right to improve the cricket.
Do you think that, given obviously linking to that under-19 team, given they're playing a weakened West Indies, do you think it's a bit disappointing that you're not going to get many chances to blood youngsters? And I don't know, I just feel like there was a bit of a missed opportunity here. Or again, do you think that's incorrect to say, or do you think, I think there's a couple in there who may or may not play, but do you think they could have maybe looked at the fact that West Indies has basically taken a regional journeyman side, certainly in the ODI side, and not thought maybe we should just blood at least 1, 2, 3 in the squad and give them the exposure?
Yeah, I certainly would have liked to have seen maybe 1 or 2 more of those under-19s or 4 under-19s in the squad. However, looking at things in the context of this huge gap, I think it would be highly unlikely that they don't, or that they wouldn't have played a full strength team regardless of who the opposition are, just simply because of the gap of 300 plus days since the last time they played international cricket. So yeah, you're right, I would have liked to have seen 1 or 2 more of the under-19s, certainly in that preliminary squad, even if they don't make it to that final squad. I think it sends out a good message. I think I said in my article, one of the players that missed out, which I was a bit surprised of, was the captain of that under-19 team. Definitely a name I would suggest to look out for in the future. He's called Akbar Ali, very impressive young man. I had the pleasure of interviewing him after the World Cup final last year. He speaks very well, speaks good English, in fact, and just a real mature head on his shoulders. And I'm just crossing my fingers that the burden of expectation doesn't kind of get to him as it could probably quite easily do, especially in like a cricket mad country like Bangladesh, where everyone is probably expecting him to step up at some point. So yeah, he's certainly one to look at for the future.
And one more thing, I guess, with the squad selection, the headlines were all about, as you mentioned, Mortaza, him being left out of the squad, 37 years old. It'd be interesting to know, what's the general public consensus regarding his omission? And do you think the fact that the headlines weren't about why aren't there younger players, but it was more about why is a 37-year-old being left out of the squad? Do you think Bangladesh has built up too much of an emotional attachment to these big name players?
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah, I agree absolutely with that sentiment. I think, yeah, it's not just in Bangladesh, I'd say. I think throughout the subcontinent, I think these cricketers become personalities almost themselves. So, I don't, I understand it in many ways that, the local media in particular is always going to pick up on a big story involving one of these big names. But in terms of his omission, yeah, I mean, look, he's been a fantastic servant. He's sacrificed so much for Bangladesh. He played in the last series against Zimbabwe, back at the start of last year, and really that seemed, to all intents and purposes, to be his farewell series. The last ODI he played, he was carried off the pitch on the shoulders of his teammates. So Tamim carried him on his shoulder. Everyone knew that it would be his last game as captain, and therefore, the presumption was that was going to be his last game at full flop. But yeah, that hasn't happened, and yeah, it's one of these things, I think, where the team management and the coaching staff seem in their kind of vision of the future, and yeah, they don't see Mashrafi as being part of that future. Unfortunately, his time for me has come. Unfortunately, like I say, he's done fantastically. I mean, just as a leader, he's by far and away been the best leader of the Bangladesh cricket team there has ever been. He's been able to galvanise that team like no one else has done, and he's also produced or been able to produce the best results as a consequence of that. So he's been a brilliant leader, sacrificed an awful lot. But yeah, I just think looking ahead to the next World Cup, for example, 23, he's not going to be around. So the team management and the coaching staff, I think, well aware of that as well.
Before we just, I know Santoki said last thing, but actually before we move on, there is one other person I want to talk about, and in the whole return to cricket and in the summer in particular, it was Jason Holder versus Ben Stokes, and when that was going on, I was like, everyone's forgotten that Shakib is actually probably in that same conversation as best all-rounder in the world, but obviously he's got a ban, so he's out of the consciousness of people. Shakib's back, and Shakib for me is at an interesting stage of his career now, because I often say when a player gets a ban, so like when Marlon Samuels got his 1 year or was it 2 year ban from cricket, he came back with a mentality of, I've got to make up for lost time. And those 2 years after Marlon got banned were his best years ever in Test cricket. He was scoring centuries galore. He was top scoring in domestic cricket. Obviously, he went on to be man of the match in the 2012 World Cup, and so on and so forth. Shakib, however, is in a slightly different position for me, because he could either come back and say, right, that's it. I'm going to make sure that my legacy is set for Bangladesh and I'm going to regain number one all-rounder in the world, red ball, white ball, this, that, the other. Or he could go down the franchise line and say, I'm done. I'm going to make my money. I'm going to tour every single franchise league there is to tour. My Bangladesh days, I'll play for Bangladesh when I feel like. Where do you reckon the Shakib story's going?
Yeah, it's another interesting one. I think I guess the most disappointing thing about the ban, or without going into the whys and wherefores of how it came about, was the timing of it, I guess, in that he just had this most brilliant World Cup. Really, he should have been player of the tournament. I know they gave it to Kane Williamson in the end, but I think that was just a bit of a sympathy vote, having lost the final. Because you look at Shakib's stats in that final, the amount of runs he scored, the amount of centuries he scored, the amount of wickets he took, and just single-handedly just winning so many, performing so well for the team and winning games individually, he was quite outstanding. So the fact that the ban came at that time where he seemed to be at the peak, absolute peak of his powers, was quite disappointing in itself. Obviously, hindsight's a wonderful thing, and actually it hasn't had a huge bearing in terms of games played, obviously, because of what's happened in terms of the pandemic. So he hasn't actually missed a whole load of cricket. And I think in terms of Shakib and his return and how well he will or won't do, I think the only person that can control that is Shakib himself. So he's one of these players who, if his focus is right, if his concentration is right, if his mind is 100% on the job, there's nothing that he can't do, really. And it's only when, various distractions off the field, whether that be his commercial interests, whether that be, he's the only person in Bangladesh who really lives a celebrity lifestyle, if you like, that's on a par with people like, Virat Kohli, or that level of stardom and fandom. He's the only person really in Bangladesh who kind of lives that life. So for me, it's about whether or not, it's about what he wants really, and where his desire is, where his motivation is. If he really wants to, like you say, cement his legacy, reclaim number one all-rounder spot in the world, then there's no reason for him not to do so. But what I would say is, he's always had an acrimonious relationship with the board, even since returning from the ban. He's already done like a couple of a couple of things that I sort of think, why have you done that? I'm not quite sure. But basically, he spent most of last year actually in the USA. He wasn't in Bangladesh at all. He was in the USA. I think his in-laws live out there, so he was kind of spent most of the ban out there. He came back to Bangladesh towards the end of last year. He kind of sought out some of his coaches from when he was first learning the game. So from when he was going through Bangladesh Academy, a place called the Bangladesh Institute of Sport. So he kind of sought out some of his old coaches to kind of work on his game again, improve his fitness, which I thought, oh, well, that's a really kind of sensible thing to do. And you know, I hope this sort of continues. But then immediately he kind of he's been involved in a couple of things where he decided, you know, we're in a pandemic. What do? I'm going to open a shop. So he opens this shop. There's this mass kind of mob, you know, hysteria around the opening of, I think it was his friend's shop. He was doing him a favor. So yeah, there's just like these strange things that sort of happen. Then he decided to go to India on the invitation, I think, of the state minister of Bengal. You know, just invited him to inaugurate something or other. And you're thinking, you know, we're in a pandemic. You're kind of clocking up quite a lot of air miles, which I'm not sure if that's a sensible thing to be doing. But yeah, it's like I say, I think it's about his focus and where he wants to be. And yeah, my fear is that he is just kind of one step away from cutting his ties with Bangladesh cricket and, you know, like you say, concentrating on the franchise circuit. And yeah, you couldn't really begrudge him for doing that. You know, how many other people are there out there that have done that and are doing that as well? And, you know, his talents, I feel actually his talents, apart from the World Cup last year, his talents have never actually received that kind of pinnacle that they deserve, in terms of they haven't really been showcased on a appropriate level consistently. It's quite interesting during the World Cup in 2019. I was speaking to people that I play sort of recreational cricket with, a lot of kind of white guys, and you know, just various people sort of saying, "Oh, Shakib, he's amazing. Where's he? You know, where's he come from?" And I was sort of saying, "Well, he's been around for like 15 years. It's just he's." For me, the way I termed it was that he's the most underrated player in the most underrated world team. So, in some ways, if he does actually end up on the franchise circuit and showcasing his talents in that way, then you know, good luck to him.
Mm. So Santoki, it looks like Bangladesh are all set. I mean, I come back full circle to what I said at the beginning, which is that I can't really predict anything other than a 3-0 defeat in the ODIs. But there's one thing, Santoki, that you and I didn't discuss. And I was like, should we come back to it at the end or not? And do you know what, Santoki? Let's quickly hit on it.
Yeah, go for it.
Because it'll be something that Tawhid will get a laugh out of as well. One thing that has happened, Santoki, since the squad was announced, the West Indies ODI squad, is every island has been beefing about why every island has been beefing whether in the newspapers or writing letters to Cricket West Indies demanding to know why players from Guyana, players from Leeward Isles, players from everyone wants to know why some of their players didn't make it. And the number one story obviously was Kieran Powell, who we've had on the pod before. He had top scored domestically the last time we had our Super 50 tournament. He's nowhere to be found in the squad, and that's caused a big ruckus. The Nevis Cricket Board writing to Cricket West Indies wanting answers about the situation. Santoki, for listeners of this pod, people who aren't in the Caribbean will know already, but what's the word I'm looking for here? The island bias will forever hold West Indies cricket back.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, in that regard, West Indies are unique in terms of cricket, in terms of any other cricketing nation, in the fact that we're not one single nation. We're made up of islands. So whereas other countries, England may have politics about counties, players from which counties, it's never a massive issue. Whereas when nationalism comes into it, as it does in the West Indies, there's always uproar, politics, drama. And as you said, rightly in Guyana, people were asking why wasn't Chandrapur Hemraj, Leon Johnson, Christopher Barnwell, why weren't they included in the squad? As you mentioned, Kieran Powell's obviously, he said he was going to record an Instagram response as to why he's not been included in the squad. So I think it is something that's probably always going to hinder West Indian cricket in terms of that collective spirit. But you can't avoid it, because essentially any island who doesn't have their player or their regional star picked, there's going to be uproar in their media and press because of the nationalistic aspect. So there's no way to get around it. I guess at this point, Mash, we're so used to it, we've almost become immune to it. And I guess the fact that we're born and bred in the UK as well makes it, we're kind of removed from that island bias politics. So we kind of see it looking out into it. But if you ask someone from Barbados or Guyana, it's hard to kind of avoid that bias and politics in terms of selections.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think it's interesting because when the squad was announced, I think I put on our Twitter handle, you know what, like obviously Bangladesh are going to have their way with us. But I was like, I'm excited to watch it all the same because it's a set of brand new players. But I do worry that if this squad goes on to lose 3-0 against Bangladesh and lose badly, people will still cuss them. People cuss them
similar
them to win.
Exactly, yeah. And I was just going to say, similar to what we talked about at the top of the show about the lack of transparency over why players didn't go to Bangladesh, I do feel with some selections, for instance, Kieran Powell's top scored in the List A domestic competition. He's been in the ODI side as recently as 2018.
In Bangladesh.
Yeah. And Roger Harper's obviously said it's because of fitness issues. Now, Kieran Powell's association have come out and said he's passed the fitness test. So there needs to be some sort of clarification. Why isn't he in the squad? Whereas you've got someone like Jason Mohammed, who hasn't played for nearly 3 years, coming in as captain straight into the squad and not put up the same level of runs. So there needs to be some transparency as to what the selection criteria is. It obviously isn't to do with age because Mohammed's older than Powell. It's obviously not to do with performances because Powell's put up more runs than Mohammed in domestic scene. Fitness-wise, if they both passed the same fitness test, why is the reason that one is going and the other's not? And you just need some sort of clarification would go some small way to alleviate an island bias. Because at the moment, if I'm from St. Kitts and Nevis, I'm thinking, all right, our guy Kieran Powell, he's been done unjustly here. He's been picked, he's been omitted unfairly. So what are the reasons? And
you know what, Kieran, I'm going to class as a friend of the podcast. I mean, he came on, he didn't have to, and he's a very good guy to talk to. The only thing I would say is that if I was Kieran, I wouldn't do Instagram. I wouldn't do I wouldn't do Instagram clapbacks against Cricket West Indies because it just never ends well unless you've got the status of a Chris Gale where you basically can do what you want and you're still going to get selected. It's not going to work. It's not going to work for anybody else. And that's not. I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying it's not going to work. And I'm fairly certain that we haven't heard the last of this. And certainly after Bangladesh with 4 series in a row, all at home, the island politics are going to rage all year long when the series kick off. That's probably us, you know.
I think what we should do then is, Tawhid, if you want to predict based on what we said about the ODI squad, the West Indian one, and your own knowledge of the players picked, what do you think the series prediction is going to be for the ODI series? And also, it'd be interesting to know who do you think is going to be the top run scorer and top wicket taker for Bangladesh in the ODI series?
Good point. Yeah.
I can't. I mean, I honestly can't see anything other than the 3-0 loss. West Indies in the white ball leg of the tour. In terms of top run scorers, I reckon Liton Das should be up there. Hopefully, I'd like to see him kind of kick on and do well as he has been. And top wicket taker, it'd be good to see the Fizz coming back into things and kind of picking up lots of wickets as well, bowling those cutters as he does up front.
Good choices. And Mash, I guess from our perspective, you've already said you've resigned yourself to a 3-0 L for the West Indies, but who do you think is going to put up of this lineup the most runs, and who's going to be the leading wicket taker?
Oh Lord. Okay, so leading wicket taker. Leading wicket taker. Do you know what? I'm assuming that West Indies are going to face a trial by spin in both the ODIs and the Test matches. I'm fairly certain Bangladesh will look at what happened the last time he played there and just destroy us with spin. But I actually think Alzari, I think his pace might cause Bangladesh a bit of a problem. Obviously, it depends. Okay, it depends on the tracks that Bangladesh are going to prepare, but you'd have to assume that Alzari is the prime pacer across the two squads and may well pose a problem for Bangladesh. So I'd go with Alzari Joseph for top wicket taker. In terms of batsmen, do you know, I can't pick anyone, Santoki. It has to. all I can say is whoever plays spin best out of that squad will end up as the top batsman. And if I have to pick someone, I'm gonna go. Do you know what? I'm gonna go with Sunil Ambrish, but that's only because I don't like. Surely Bangladesh will open up with some seamers initially. so if that's the case, that gives Sunil Ambrish a chance to get off to a flyer before the spinners come on from like over number 10 or whatever it might be, and have their wicked way with us. What about you, Santoki?
You know what? I was going to say Joseph as well. I think partly down to the fact that I think pace will play a role in this series, and also just my lack of confidence in Walsh and Hussain in terms of taking wickets. I don't think either of them will necessarily take like a fifer in any of the ODIs. So I'll go with Joseph because he's across the series, he's the best bowler, as you said, especially with the white ball. He's quite prolific. So I'll go with him. And yeah, funny enough, actually, I was going to say Ambis purely based on the fact that he's in the ODI squad on merit. He was in the last tour and he scored 60 runs in Sri Lanka subcontinent conditions as well. So he knows how to play spin. He can play a bit of pace as well. And the fact that he's opening means he'll have a longer period to kind of settle in and build runs. So I'll go with Ambris. And that's also partly because pretty much from 2 to 5, you don't know who's going to play it all. Could be anyone. Yeah. So I don't want to back anyone that doesn't even make the 11. So I'll go with Ambris and Joseph as well. But you know what? I'm going to be optimistic and say 2-1.
Oh, I didn't give a score. Yeah, do you know what? I'm going to go 2-1 as well.
But I'm going to say in terms of, I think it'll be one of those ones where we're 2-0 down. It's the last ODI. Bangladesh rest players for the Test series. 1 or 2 players in the West Indian squad just step up, put in a man of the match performances, and we get a win. So I think we'll lose the series, but I'm hoping for a 2-1. I'll take a 2-1 at this point.
Oh yeah, 2-1. 2-1 is technically a defeat for Bangladesh.
Yeah. 2-1. 2-1 loss is carnival for me and Michelle. We're pulling out the flags, everything.
Well, I mean, I guess the other thing is that, it's so rare for Bangladesh to be such overwhelming favourites going into a series anyway, that I'm not sure, that sits well with them. So, having watched Bangladesh over a number of years, anything can happen when they play.
So we leave it with the final question. Normally, when we ask a question, if it's to a player, we say, what's the best ground that they've played at? I don't know if you've traveled to the Caribbean before, Tawhid, so it may have to be that it's based on visual imagery. But we haven't actually been keeping the tally, so I probably have to go back and listen to past episodes and keep a record. But I'm fairly certain it's fairly certain it's Barbados that's in the lead, or Queen's Park. But of all the grounds in the Caribbean that you've seen cricket played at, whether on TV or maybe even live, I don't know, which one is the best ground to play cricket at, or watch cricket at, I should say?
So, yeah, I have actually been to the Caribbean twice. I've been to Barbados just on a holiday, and then I was at the 07 World Cup following Bangladesh during the group phase of that, where they were based in Port of Spain in Trinidad. So, yeah, I have some really fond memories of Queen's Park Oval. That World Cup was quite quite a strange one because I remember there was lots of kind of controversy about the locals not being allowed to kind of take their instruments, and as a consequence, not the ground wasn't full all the time. But I still remember the Trini Posse stand when it got going. It was still kind of jumping, and you could kind of feel the good vibes coming from there. And just having lots of fun. I remember Dwayne Leverock's catch. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
I was there in the stands when that happened. And Bangladesh obviously beat India as well in their first match. So real fond memories from my time at Port of Spain. But I'd love to go back. I'd love to kind of watch cricket in Jamaica. Has always been one of my well.
So wait, are we saying Queen's Park Oval as your number one?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah.
Oh, another one for Queen's Park Oval. I didn't hear any mention of Guyana in there, so it's all good. But Tawhid, you've been an amazing guest, and like I say, for anyone who's listening for this particular episode, this won't be the last you'll hear from Tawhid. Obviously, this Bangladesh tour is going on for quite a while. We'll probably, Tawhid, try and get you on one of our Rumshot diaries, because we'll be doing wrap ups after days play or games or whatever it might be. So I'm fairly certain you'll say yes to coming on one of our
absolutely,
posts. Whether it's a test match, one of the days after the test matches, or after the 1 day games, whatever it might be, we'd love to have you back on. Go read Tawhid's piece, which is on our Substack at the moment. For those who are listening online, for those who are listening to the audio, that's caribbeancricket.substack.com. Go have a look at that. Brilliant article in terms of understanding the Bangladesh story ahead of this series. But that, ladies and gents, has been episode 33. By the time this is out, it should be maybe a few days before maybe a week before the very first ODI. Follow us at Carib Cricket. We'll be updating throughout the tour, and we'll rally around the West. I mean, good luck to Bangladesh, but we're here to rally. We're here to rally around the West Indies as they try to win at least one game on the tour. Thank you very much. I've been your co-host, Mashal St. Patrick Hewitt. We've had Santoki on as usual, and Tawhid Qureshi has been on as our Bangladesh expert. Thank you, everyone, and good night.